What up, nerds? My name is Leslie Smith. Welcome back to the Nerdy Narrative. Today is my recent reads video. This is my weekly check-in where I tell you all about all the things that I have finished reading since I last talked to you, the things that I am currently reading, and what I plan to read next. Let's jump into what I finished since I talked to you all last week. I did finish Full Moon by Jim Butcher. One of the things that I love about this urban fantasy series is while you do see some of your usual supernatural beings, Jim Butcher either changes characteristics and sometimes he'll even add some new characteristics. It makes it interesting. And in this case, we get 4 different types of werewolves, but what I noticed on this reread, I like Stormfront better than Full Moon. The reason being for that is I think it's because Stormfront is the beginning. It's where it all starts. It's where I meet a lot of characters. I see the seeds of things beginning there, and I know what that seed is going to grow into over the course of the series, so I think it has a lot of nostalgia for me. That doesn't mean I didn't enjoy this one. There was a lot of funny moments in this one. There were things that happened I forgot happened in this one. I thought it happened in later books, which only increases my excitement for continuing the reread. Next, just like I told y'all last week when I got done, I said I was going to finish this one. I did. This book was so good. My friend Amanda from the Reading and Writing Live saw me talk about this one last week and she picked it up. It's a short book. It's 4 hours on the audiobook and blazed right on through it, and then we had fun talking about it with each other. This was so good. So good. When I pick up a supernatural thriller, this is exactly what I'm looking for. So if any of you have read this book and you know others that are like it, please put those titles and authors down in the comments for me to pick up, because this was absolutely amazing. It may just have become my favorite thriller. After I finished The Patient, I picked up The Judas Blossom by Stephen Aryan. This is an arc that I was provided by Angry Robot Books. I read the book in 3 sittings. It was incredible. I want to say the date of its release is July 11th. It's July something. It is available for pre-order, and if you are already a fan of Stephen Aryan, you're definitely going to want to get your hands on his new bag of tricks with this historical fantasy series. It's a Persian-inspired story about a band of rebels and what they do in response to the cancerous spread of the Mongol Empire. The number one thing that I love about historical fantasy or historical fiction in general is when the author takes actual factual historical events and they either sprinkle in fictional characters to give it some depth, to engage the reader into the story. I went straight to my computer, hunted up all sorts of information about the Mongol Empire, how it got its start, how it spread, and what it is today. And so my life was not just enriched with a really good story and a world for me to immerse myself in, I also learned a little bit of history and relearned in some cases. I do remember we studied it in school, but that was a very, very long time ago for me. Stephen Aryan used a lot of characters who existed, but he was so smart about it. He picked some characters, like we'll talk about Princess Kokoshin in particular. There is very little that is known about the princess. What we do know is the Mongol Empire wiped out her family and gave her to one of the Khans as a wife. She lived for 2 years after that. So we have this historical mystery that Stephen Aryan took and said, I think I have a little something up my sleeve for as far as what this character might have gotten into, and would explain why she was only around for 2 years. It was so good. It was genius. As you can tell, I absolutely loved it. So if you're asking me, should you pre-order that book? Absolutely. And looking at my pile here, I believe Judas Blossom is the last book that I finished. So now it's time to talk about what books I've started and I am still working on. First up here, I am still working on this nonfiction work by Zora Neale Hurston called Tell My Horse. We've really gotten into the good stuff now. Previously, she's discussed a lot about Jamaica and Haiti, and now we are digging into voodoo. The next chapter looks like it's going to be a very thorough and in-depth discussion and explanation of voodoo, and I am so excited to get into that one. I believe at last week's check-in, I told y'all I had started dipping my toes into the American Cannibal Anthology edited by Rebecca Rowland. Okay, so American Cannibal, you can see the cover. You might be able to guess that these are stories where the theme is cannibalism. I think I forgot to mention, these are historical fiction horror stories. And oh my gosh, They have been so good so far. I've gotten back into my habit of posting daily on Instagram. When I read one of these stories, I do a little quick synopsis and share a quote from the story, so everyone can take a look at those and see if it's a collection they want to invest in. I have really been enjoying myself, pun intended, reading these. They have been so well written so far, which is such a contradiction. It'll have the most beautiful prose and then all of a sudden you're going, that's disgusting. In my opinion, that means mission accomplished. I did get the audiobook from my library for the second book in the Wheel of Time series, The Great Hunt. When I started reading this series back in the mid-90s, if audiobooks were a thing, I had no knowledge of them, and only up until about 3 years ago was I even willing to learn how to use an audiobook. And I can tell you, they really, really make a difference in my enjoyment of the series, because while I love this series, Robert Jordan has some very, very lengthy descriptions. He also repeats himself a lot. So the audiobooks make it less noticeable, if that makes any kind of sense. Like if I'm reading it and I read it over and over, it starts becoming very noticeable to me. I'll start counting it. It'll pull me out of the story. But in the audiobook, it just kind of flows. I don't know if that makes any kind of sense. One promise I made last week, I did follow through on. I started The Way of Unity by Sarah K. Ballstra. I am 70 pages in. I don't know what to think. I'm enjoying the story. I know I like the story. What I mean by I don't know what to think is, where I'm at currently, there's two sides to the story. We have the intercessors, and then we have the people of Velspar. And the ruling families of Velspar, they're called the Scalans or the Scalans. I'm not sure how that A is supposed to be pronounced. A small number of them have met. They formed an alliance. They believe, and will have you believe, the intercessors are evil. And when I was just getting it from their point of view, I agreed. But then the author throws in a chapter from the point of view from an intercessor, and I really liked this intercessor. And in my opinion, this intercessor helped this man who needed help. Now, I don't agree with the way she did it. It was kind of violent. So I'm conflicted. I don't know what to believe. I need more information, and to do that, I'm going to need to keep reading. This is my first time reading anything by this author. Some of the way that the author writes their descriptions. Listen to this one. I just have to share this one. Her mother's thorn-bitten hands fussed over an arrangement of crimson roses at the center of the table. They were the first of the season, impressive in number, and arranged lengthways in a glass vessel that showed the cleanness of their stems. With petals pursed, the newly opened buds sat atop one another, fringed by dark leaves. One was too long and had to be pushed down, another unfairly shaded by foliage. A wet smear needed to be polished from the vase, and all the while the attendants waited, the evening meal growing cold as they stood with their silver trays along the far wall. Could you see that? Could you see those roses? The way that they were described, it wasn't overly done. It was just a paragraph, but I could see those roses so clearly. And it's not an usual way that you see a flower arrangement. Normally you just see them standing up in a vase, but in this case, they're in a vessel that's lengthways. I love that. I absolutely love that. And I'm one of those people that when I read, I picture it in my mind. So when an author writes in this kind of style, it really increases my reading enjoyment. So I'm looking forward to reading more, and I'll update you all next week. I don't think I'll have this one finished by then because I'm reading it too slow, because I'm enjoying the way that it's written too much. Some of the scenes with some of the characters, they're in their memories, and just the way those scenes are written are so vivid that I've reread them a couple of times just to enjoy the imagery and make sure I have it set in my mind. So I think this one's going to be a slower read for me, but I'm really enjoying it, and I look forward to telling you guys more about it as I keep going. So you're probably thinking, okay, she's reading a short story collection and 3 books. That's it. No, I started another one, Don't Fear the Reaper by Stephen Graham Jones. This one came out on Tuesday. It is the second book in the Lake Witch trilogy, the sequel to My Heart is a Chainsaw, which I read and loved. I want to say I read that book 2.5 times in the year that it came out. I went ahead and got the audiobook for Don't Fear the Reaper because I just couldn't wait to get the physical book to get started. I am loving it. I'm loving being back in this world. There's one thing that the author did in the first book that was one of my favorite parts, and I was hoping it was going to be in this one, and it hasn't been, at least not so far. If you haven't read My Heart is a Chainsaw, I'm not going to tell you what that is. It's not that big of a deal as far as a spoiler, but it's really fun to experience as a first-time reader. But I am loving this one. I will hopefully have it finished by the time I talk to y'all next week. And as far as what I'm going to read next, if all goes according to plan, I'll have Don't Fear the Reaper done in a couple of days, and then my pre-order for the audiobook for C.K. McDonald's Love Will Tear Us Apart is going to be out. I'm buddy reading that with my friend Gail. This is the third book in the Stranger Times series, and it's so good. It's a paranormal thriller, takes place in England. It is phenomenal. I'm not gonna get crazy and say any other books because I do have 4 going, but I will probably throw in the next chronological Dresden read, which is the short story B is for Bigfoot. And then if I have time, next up in the chronological order is the graphic novel Ghoul Goblin. Both of these are short, so if I do finish up 1 or 2 of these books, I'll go ahead and slide that in so I can talk to you guys about it next week. And that is it. That's everything I've been getting into reading wise this week. Y'all, thank you so much for being here today and checking in to see what all I have been reading. What have you been reading? Are you reading Don't Fear the Reaper? Let me know down in the comments below how that's going for you so far if you are, or what you're reading that you're loving. Have a great rest of your day, and I'll catch you in the next one.